shoulder flexion. So we're gonna use the door jamb here as an anchor point to kind of play with holding onto a surface and then being able to move our trunk to be able to get into more shoulder elevation or shoulder flexion. So where I like to start is off to the front of the door jamb here, especially for someone who has really limited active range of motion. You can grab the door jamb and you can kind of work your hand up. And then what we can do is bring the left hand down and I can shift my hips back and leverage my back toward the door jamb behind me and push this left hand into the wall to kind of help drive flexion. And really what I'm doing is I'm using my trunk to drive the motion. And then a way that I can scale that is just simply move my hand up to the corner and I'm gonna shift my hips. Now I'm getting into more flexion, right? And then eventually I wanna be able to kind of get up to this top piece. And a couple ways that I can get into a more overhead position is just simply by bending my knees and keeping my fingers engaged at the top of there and then coming out of that. Or I can keep my hand here and I can shift my hips back and look toward the floor. And then eventually I can kind of get hand above, go back in that same idea where I'm just bending my knees and squatting or shifting my hips back. And then we can kind of add rotation too. So getting in that overhead position is a coupled motion. It's not just one plane of motion that's going to allow me to get into that overhead position. So maybe I kind of come back out of that, I shift my hips, and I kind of rotate through, and then I step in, rotate through, kind of step into the door jamb. So that way I'm kind of playing with that exact shoulder positioning in the overhead. Because some people, it's going to be more comfortable here versus here. So moving your feet when your arm is fixed is going to allow you to kind of find that position that's most comfortable for you. And then we're just trying to spend time. We're trying to accumulate time in these positions to elongate tissues, to calm the nervous system down, to get used to being back in that overhead position. And then we'll pair this with some sort of active training. Maybe it's a half kneeling, landmine press, whatever it may be specific to you. That'll be depicted in your programming. But like the other doorway shoulder exercises, there is no right or wrong. Let's kind of be playful with your setup, be mindful of how you're setting up. If we're trying to get into an overhead position, try your best to get as much overhead positioning without compensating a lot through the back. And that's why I like this setup, because it gives us the cue of putting our hips on the door jamb behind us, bringing our chest toward the floor, which is going to cue more flexion versus extension. And a lot of times when we get into an overhead position, we'll really cheat through extension.